streaming. Oh, please work. Oh, okay. Is this it? Damn it. Showing up in the wrong. Okay. Okay, so that link I just gave you didn't work for some reason, so I'll give you the new link, I guess.
Okay.
Ugh. Okay. Do 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 do. Okay. Delete. Okay, so I got one working. It's just the wrong link. So here's the link.
Okay. And you're sending it through Messenger?
Sure, yeah. Okay, so I got one working. It's just the wrong link. So here's the link. Just gonna turn that
Okay.
down.
And you're sending it through.
Okay, Messenger. Correct link. Okay. Almost
Okay.
ready. Left to posting. Okay. Save. Okay. Have to change the link. And we are ready to rock. Okay. So, all right, Jeff, we are in part 2 of Sexual Personae. We just covered this 2 days ago at Philosophy Club in Kingston. Paglia is, of course, very controversial, funny to deal with, and we're just on the first chapter here. We're finishing the first chapter, is that right?
Yes. Yes. Today we are finishing the first chapter.
Okay. So, all right. Well, let's give us a quick reminder of what we learned last time, and so we can start off clean
Okay.
with this
So
one.
Paglia, she writes this book in an attempt to explain art history, the entire Western art history from the very beginning of civilization, even before that, to the modern era. And her main claim is that Western civilization is pagan in the sense of being focused on the visual images. And it's always been in tension with civilizations that are based on the ear and what you hear. And in that sense, it's a creative tension, but it's a tension that's there nonetheless. Judeo-Christianity comes from that ear-centric culture, and it was traditionally we're told that Christianity defeated the Roman Empire, but in fact, she claims that based on the idea of the eye and the ear, it was the other way around. The Roman Empire paganized Christianity, and the result is modern Catholicism that has a strong influence or a strong relationship with the image. So they have statues, they have paintings in their churches, whereas Muslim and Jewish and even Protestants have none or far fewer images of any kind. Then, then she goes on to say that it's there's a biological as well as there's mostly a biological difference in men and women that leads men to seek protection among themselves from nature, from women, and from death, and that this impetus from men is the has essentially created all civilization, which has raised women up with them. And then she starts off by saying, and then she continues on to say that it's all a delusion. The female is in fact much, and everything that goes with female is much stronger than male. She labels that Chthonian. The Chthonian forces in the world will crush anything and everything that men make eventually, but we delude ourselves into thinking that what we have today and the advances of civilization are permanent, but it's all delusion and it's all going to fall someday.
Beautiful. Uplifting.
But
Uplifting
until
stuff.
it does, civilization will be a very interesting, dramatic, fun, and comfortable place to be.
And it'll be delusional,
But it's a delusion, yes.
but a fun one.
It's a fun one,
All right,
yes.
so let's pick up then for where we started this week.
So yeah, just as a bit of a touch on the last one, there are two major opposing forces in the world. There's society,
Right.
which is a sort of a new term, but the idea of civilization or of dominating nature. And then there is nature. Nature is by far the more powerful force. It's always there, and it will always win. It's analogous to a garden. When you plant a garden, you are pushing away nature and stylizing it to your wishes. And in the same way, we do that with everything that we do. And civilization is a product of that. We do it with art, we do it with technology, we do it with science, we do it with music. All of that stuff is a stylization of art. It's delusional because it's not going to last forever. Your garden, if you stop tending it, will be taken over by weeds again, and nature will have its way with it. That will happen to all of us. We are in a world where we're all of those of us who are alive are pretty much fighting nature, and we will lose eventually. We will die.
So this mirrors what you get out of a lot of those Cosmos documentaries where they talk about I guess it's entropy and that whatever's ordered now, um, you know, whatever
Will be
seems like order now, planets, suns, things
Mhm.
that are together, will eventually fall apart and dissolve into cold nothingness. Just like I guess the social construction of civilization, what she's talking about.
Yes. So, in a cosmological term, the universe will die in a bit of entropy, I guess. I think they call it the heat death. You and I, everybody we know, will eventually die. We will dissolve from ashes to ashes. We go, or from whatever they say, and same will happen to cities and civilizations.
So that's what makes it a delusion.
The fact that we think it's permanent, yes. The
Right.
fact that
Okay.
any kind of art or anything that we do is going to make a big difference in the long run. However, while we're here, it makes all the difference for us, and that's where the fun starts for her.
Okay.
So, in contrast to society, she has nature, and she names those forces Chthonian, but she labels anything that makes the delusional fight against nature, this temporary apparent victory that we have every time that we continue to survive, Apollonian. Anything that we do to tame or push back nature is, from her perspective, Apollonian. So it's pretty much everything that's around us. Um, it's yeah, it's a delusion, um, and men are the epitome of this in the sense that they're the
Epitome.
ones pushing us forward because, as we said last time, we have three behavioral stimuli that
Nudges.
make us want to do this. Nudges, yes, which doesn't mean that women can't be Apollonian. It's just that men have a statistical advantage because every day we get these repeated things that women don't get. These repeated nudges. It's her explanation of also why there's a lot more men in jail and a lot more um, super successful men. So one thing that she points out is that there's no female Mozart for the same reason there's no female Jack the Ripper. Men are trying to be men, and they do great and horrible things. They move civilization forward. They also slow it down in some cases, and that's why a lot more men are in jail than women.
Okay, so um, I think a feminist critique would be that to say something like that the reason men are so many men end up in prison is because of toxic masculinity and the patriarchy um, breeding them this way or teaching them to act this way.
Uh,
Or
so she would disagree with that. It's the patriarchy, or what she would refer to better as civilization, that is actually keeping safe and sane. Uh, it's when those go away, or when those are weakened, when patriarchy or civilization is weakened, that men, and it is really all men, um, are more likely to succumb to their, I guess, lust and violence, inherent lust and violence. Um, so in another book, she's talking about slut walks. I think we've talked about this in the past. The idea that women should be able to wear whatever they want anytime they want and assume that they'll be safe. This branch of feminism that says that women would be safe in such a situation or should be safe in that situation is creating a delusional danger for a lot of women. And she points out that it's testosterone is is like a drug that changes behavior. And if the typical man has 12 to 144 times more testosterone than the typical woman, if you consider that a difference in alcohol, it creates a behavioral difference. Um, so most men would probably behave properly in a civilized situation, but there are psychos out there who don't. And to suggest that you would be safe when you're triggering people with the psychotic tendencies, you're not. And women should be aware of that.
so
So that's one of the things that
that's women buying into the delusion, the delusions that men have set up
yes.
for to their own peril.
Well, it's not so much to their own peril. It's to our advantage. I mean, it's a wonderful thing to think that we're safe in our homes and that civilization will continue and that we have a future. Um, it's a wonderful feeling to have. She says, "Don't be so sure."
But then, isn't that just a failure of society to teach men and boys well enough to know how to treat women? To
That is what society is supposed to do. Whenever it, whenever a man say rapes a woman, that is a failure of society to socialize.
well, yeah. So then, shouldn't we put the onus on men then?
You can, but the point that she's saying is that society is a delusion as well. So here in Canada, there's a great tragedy in that many Indigenous women have been murdered and are missing. And the way I think that she would explain that is that quite often it happens on the outskirts of civilization, on empty highways far away from law enforcement or from the regular forces that keep men in check. If you're out there hitchhiking, you don't have to dress provocatively to trigger some men, right? Uh, Here in civilization where there's offices or where there's police everywhere, you may have to put up more triggers. That's essentially what she's saying. Where civilization reaches its limits, you get law, you get disorder, you get lawlessness, and that's where a lot of people find they are more vulnerable. But at the same time, it can happen within civilization because these triggers exist everywhere, and there are cycles out there.
Okay, okay.
So yeah, it's a and also I guess this sort of leads into what we were talking about last time. Um, The idea that the biblical idea that we've been given dominion over the earth is a very Apollonian idea. The fact that it's being reinterpreted nowadays to mean harmony with or stewardship of the earth is a very dangerous one for civilization, because going back to nature is essentially shortening your life. When you go into nature, you're getting closer to things that want to kill you, and civilization has extended people's lives. If you go back to living in a state of nature, your life will be, as Thomas Hobbes said, nasty, short,
Nasty,
brutish.
brutish, and short, I think.
Yeah, there was five adjectives I
Oh,
think I
okay.
recall. But yeah, that's what happens in a state of nature. We move further away from that with civilization. Civilization gets better, gets more comfortable, more interesting. You move further towards nature, your life gets shorter. If you are working hard physical labor on a farm, chances are um, you're going to have a lot more back pains or something else. If you're a hunter gatherer, you may be actually killed by your prey. These are the kind of things that we're worried about. If you take away the science that we have, diseases that we would have vaccines for will kill you much more likely to kill you. It doesn't mean that everybody will be shorter, but more than likely it will. So,
Let me throw one thing out there though. The blue zones where people live the longest around the world tend to be um, in small communities, societies where people garden and do work on the land all their lives into their 90s and hundreds.
okay, I'm not familiar with that. If that's the Amish or something like that, because I've heard that's the Japanese that are have the longest
Okinawans,
life.
yeah. I mean, yeah, they're. I mean, they. It's not like they don't. The Okinawans, they don't buy their salmon from the supermarket. They catch them themselves, and they um they cure them and all that stuff. Um,
So, if that is in fact the case, then that would suggest that society is starting to kill us, and that's probably a sign of decadence.
okay.
So perhaps mass-produced. Uh, so yeah, okay. So she doesn't get into this, but as speculating on what I think she might say on this is that about the 1950s, we went from a scarcity sort of regime where most of the diseases that killed people were as a result of a lack. So we had things like scurvy, polio, and a bunch of other things that were a lack of certain vitamins or minerals.
Yes.
Nowadays, since the 1950s, we've had so much food, at least here in the West, in the developed countries, that most of our diseases are a result of having too much. So
Civilized. Yes, absolutely. That's a bit. Yes, big time.
obesity. So that might be something, a major shift in civilization where towards the end, it's actually trying to kill you also, which might be a source of nature's return. But she doesn't get so much into that. But what she is saying, though, is if you reduce the amount of law and order in society, chances are you're going to die a much more violent death than if you didn't. If you reduce the amount of science in society, chances are that you're going to um, die of something that's preventable. So anti-vaxxers are probably not going to be helpful to society or themselves as examples. If you're far away from a hospital where they have the latest medicine and technology to cure or diagnose you, chances are that you may fail in your survival sooner um, than if you were closer to civilization. That's what she means by when people are getting back to nature, uh, meaning away from civilization. That's what she's referring to.
Okay.
So, from a perspective of dominating nature, which is what we're doing right now, um, the idea of getting into balance or living in harmony with it is a delusion, because nature is trying to kill you. It will kill you eventually. Everybody dies.
Okay. So those trying to live a more minimalist, closer to the land life are just delusional.
Not necessarily. It's just that I mean, it might be part of, okay, yes, everybody's delusional in that sense. Um, if it's a more healthy lifestyle, there's a possibility there. But what she's referring to is the elimination of all the progress we have. So if you're living close to the land and you still have access to all the technology that we have, we might be okay. But if you're like really thinking of going as a pioneer into, you know, um, Alaska or the Northwest Territories, where chances are you're not going to survive.
All right. Sounds
Okay.
fair.
So the next point that she brings up is the is Earth cult and an Apollonian movement to the sky cult. So she points out that throughout the history of the world, in pretty much everywhere that she studied, the initial religious rituals or truths or expressions were always directed at female goddesses of fertility. And
Wow.
they were always goddesses, and it was always fertility because um, imagine from a primitive man, suddenly a woman suddenly has a baby and gives birth to a baby. A new life comes out of her. Men can't do that.
Nope.
It's almost magical, right? I mean, without the explanations of science, it is a certain magicalness there, and there's a certain creativity there. You see this in the land. You plant a seed, and suddenly out comes a crop. There's a connection there that's easily made. And in this primitive era, women essentially had the power. Uh, However, men, because they are afraid of women, afraid of nature, and afraid of death, over 1,000 years, and she detects this over 1,000 year period, started moving from the earth cult to a sky cult, from material to immaterial, from womb centric to brain centric. And she sees this as culminating in Christianity, which literally believes that a man, Jesus, who died and was buried in the earth, the feminine, uh, the feminine sort of earth, and could not be held there, rose again into the sky, is seated at the right hand of his Father, two men, where he will come and judge the living and the dead. This is, from her perspective, the highest culmination of sky cult that totally overcomes the more primitive earth cult. And she sees this as a male movement, a male domination of, or a delusional, but an attempted domination of women, nature, and death. The whole promise of Christianity, of course, is that you will have eternal life, right? Um, it, from her perspective, it's quite delusional.
She's this movement from the belly magic to the sky magic as the replacement of a female centered society to a male centered, and that's what kicked off the transition to civilization.
Yes. Well, and Christianity 2,000 years ago was the culmination of that from her perspective.
The
Yes.
culmination.
Yes. She does say that Christianity expressed that in the highest, most possible way. So the idea that God is male, not female, doesn't live on earth, lives in heaven, came to earth, died, but the female form could not hold him, and he rose back up, and then will come back and judge living and the dead. That's she believes is a uniquely male delusion and idea that no woman would have been able to come up with for the simple reason that it goes against their nature. Women are cyclical, whereas men are looking towards a directed end to try and stop death, try and dominate women and dominate nature.
So then, what's the significance that Jesus was born, was conceived without impregnating Mary?
Not in the sense of a normal man, yes, but God the Father um, created. Well, I guess. Well, God the Father is supposed to be the father there,
Okay.
and I believe I'm not 100% sure. In those days, women were considered just a vessel. They just sort of provided the nutrients, but it was the man who provided the seed, which gives the idea that it's all male. That idea that and it's still prevalent in many places. We even talk about male seed is part of the leftover pre-scientific notions that men were the ones who fathered everything, despite the fact that it's actually women who create life. So even in the ancient pagan Greek mythology, Zeus is supposed to have given birth to Athena by having a headache and getting his head split open, and he was given birth to Vulcan by having a pain in his thigh or something to that effect, right? So already in the Greek myths prior to Christianity, you start to see how a man is giving birth and creating, right? Um, that that was a step along the way, and um, uh,
So then Judaism is another couple steps above that, and then Christianity is the final form.
uh, in that particular narrative where man takes over, yes, she looks at Islam and doesn't see any of that. Um, so from her perspective, it's not it's not moving the narrative forward or moving the great arc of history forward in that sense.
Um, okay, Jackie in the comments is also noting that the story of the virgin birth and and all these things is that's a copied story throughout history, way
Oh, no
before
doubt.
Jesus.
I mean, all of these myths um, were amalgamations of things from the past, improvements on them. The final version wasn't even said until like I think when the Bible was made canon, which was I think like 300 AD, right? So,
Yeah.
um, yeah, there's no doubt that there is cross pollination between them all, and it could have been very different. It could have taken a couple more thousand years. I don't know. The All she's saying is that in the actual history of humanity of the world, Christianity is the most audacious um, delusion, you could say, out there because it takes the real world, like women are the ones who bear children, um, and says, no, it's the other way around. Women just are just, vessels and it's men that do it. And that it's men that are ruling from the sky and all that kind of stuff.
Okay.
So, yeah. So then she goes on to say how, as a result of this, everybody is better off, even if it's only temporary. Um, it was, and what people call patriarchy is really civilization. It's not that it can't be different, but it is there. And it's not that you want to change it. It is a delusion that is beneficial and interesting. Um, Now she starts to knock some women who are upset with the patriarchy and with civilization because they are, in their attempts to get back to nature, they're actually killing themselves and making themselves more vulnerable to death. And anybody who follows that philosophy closer to danger if they think that somehow women are going to be safe around men in any way, shape, or form at any time. I mean, it's as long as civilization is around, you're going to be safer than if there's no civilization around. If you reduce the this is what she would say to feminists who believe that the feminism that she doesn't believe in, is that the more you fight against civilization, the more you try to be like a man, the more you will be punished by nature.
And this is what this is her argument against third wave feminism.
Yes, and a few other minor little things, but yeah. Also, I guess I should point out she has this is a also a pretty controversial thing. She doesn't seem to believe in free will. So we are essentially acting out what our biology and our circumstances will make us do. All the forces that are on us make us do what we do. We think we have choices, but that's a delusion that is helpful for civilization. So if you think that you created your personal empire of your own free will, that's great because you feel like you did it. And if you felt that you wouldn't be able to do that, you may not have, the forces would have been different on you. So these psychological forces, biological forces, hormonal forces on you, at every step at every moment, every part of your body is like, there must be thousands of, maybe tens of thousands of different aspects that are trying to find homeostasis. The nutrients are trying to get to the heart, to the lungs, to oxygen is trying to get everywhere. And if you don't have enough, you take a deeper breath. Your body reacts and tries to do that. You have to go to the bathroom, you get hungry, you get tired. All of these things are happening simultaneously, and all of these forces, plus the chemical imbalances that are happening in your brain at all the times with either testosterone or just lack of vitamins or too many vitamins or
Yeah.
drugs or anything like that. All of these things are contributing to the forces that are acting on you. Plus, on top of that, then you have cultural forces. So your mind says that it's important not to break this taboo, or it's important that I do this and that and all that stuff. And it all gets thrown into the mix. And what happens is that the we act as the only way we can. But a part of our delusion thinks I had a choice. I could have slept in this morning, or I could have woken up earlier. I could have done a better job. No, no, you could not, is what she's saying. Civilization is on track. It's going the way it is, and it's going to fail someday, just as certainly as we're all going to die.
Well, I've listened to enough Sam Harris to be. I'm already sold on the no free will thing.
Oh my, okay. So you realize that that is also going pretty much contrary to the criminal justice system, which essentially punishes people because they're assumed to have free will and could have done differently.
Right. Right. So, well, I mean, I'm against the criminal justice system anyway.
Okay.
wholeheartedly in the first place. What are her thoughts on the criminal justice system, or does she say anything?
Doesn't talk about it in this book, and she thinks it's a great thing. I think she thinks it's a great thing. She doesn't really touch about it that much. Uh,
She thinks criminal
because
justice.
it's a tool of civilization. It provides a force. I mean, the fear of the justice system is never complete because there's always crime around. But it does deter us when you get rid of the possibility of being punished, say through the justice system. Um, Men, it's mostly men, become things like Jack the Ripper.
Right, because she's Hobbesian, so she imagines that without these strong forces, we would be animals. We'd be wild
Yes.
animals doing.
And just to be clear, they are strong forces relative to my personal force or your personal force. They're tiny and completely unbalanced compared to forces of nature.
Okay, right. So we're all these things in civilization are peanuts compared to the force of nature.
Exactly, yes.
Okay,
And the force of nature is also within us.
with you're
So
right.
when civilization falls away, we fall into violence and lust, meaning men.
Uh, Sergio in chat says that Camille is pro political assassination and pro death penalty.
I'm not sure if she was joking about that or not. I seem to recall that in a video, but I was distracted. And I had to go and she hasn't talked about it in the books that I've read.
So it was it's some. I'm assuming he's referring to some video where she talked about it. What do you remember the context?
It had something to do with football also. She's a very passionate football fan.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, she's pretty masculine.
so, but I gotta say, at every praise of man's actions and accomplishments, she subtly jabs at his pretensions. I mean, he is full of delusions, and although she credits men, and she uses the word man, but she's not talking about women. She's really literally talking about people with
Penises.
to an X and Y chromosome. Yes, um, uh, as having essentially given us all the luxuries and comforts of civilization, and all the atrocities, all of both of which are delusional, as in they the idea that you can commit genocide is a delusion that you can get rid of somebody or an entire
Right.
group. No, the thing that the fact that the thought that you can conquer death is a delusion, and there's a lot of people who believe that and who are just looking for a cure to death and that kind of stuff. It moves civilization forward and it makes it interesting, but it is all that. It's just a delusion.
Well,
Fill me in, take over.
how would she square the kind of modern biological science um that says sex is more on a spectrum um than it is bimodal or bi
I
uh
suspect she would agree that there's a certain spectrum. I mean, some men have more testosterone than others, meaning that they will act differently.
right, and there's intersex and then there's trans and
Those are few and far between. So it
right, but
is
there's still
close to bipolar thing, and there's always the in between. Yes. Um,
I mean, there's people nowadays, lots of them, more and more that claim they're non-binary. Now that takes them out of the whole kind of male-female equation that she has presented here. So
so yeah, she presents it. It's simple to understand. Um, so she originally identified as lesbian, but I've heard her on video say she's attracted to men. She just can't stand men at the same time.
okay,
Okay. Um, it's never gone well. They're beneath her in many ways. She's incredibly intelligent, and I can't imagine uh, somebody as intelligent as her having to deal with somebody who's less intelligent. And she's a fighter. It's quite clear. So in that sense, she claims that she's attracted to men. She just can't stand them and wouldn't want to be with them for very long. Um, she also believes that there's no such thing as you're born this way. That's just crazy. It's a choice. It was a choice for her, and it's not.
to be a
It's not
lesbian.
to be yes, but she wouldn't say it's. Well, okay, she used the term innovation. Gayness, lesbianism, are innovations that people have come up with, and it's part of the drama of civilization, of decadent civilization. By decadent, she means the proportion of time that's spent on making on survival versus the time spent on non-survival things.
Okay. So then, in let's say the Middle Ages, the Dark Ages,
Hmm.
when things were pretty rough, there was very little technology, and civilization, or creature comforts for the poor. Then were there just not gayness would just not show up? Trans people would show up less. Is that what she's saying?
Uh, it's not that they would show up less; there'd be no real change in the internal workings, I guess, of people. The opportunity to express it would not be there. So if you have no, if in a world in which you're basically focused on survival, you have no chance for uh, literature or drama or plays or anything like that. You put in civilization, and suddenly you've got free time. You start to do these kind of things, and people start to enjoy it. If you're concentrating on survival, um, things that are not necessarily for survival, like sexual orientation or preferences, mean very little. I mean, if you're
So it's
struggling
just
to
a
survive,
non-issue, really. It doesn't
yeah,
matter that
essentially,
you're
these kind of things appear when civilization is decadent. And for her, decadent again means people are so well off that they don't have to worry too much about survival. They've got everything they pretty much need, and they have a lot of free time to do other things. Um, she points out at one point that a lot of this stuff existed in the Roman Empire just before it fell, before the Dark Ages. Um, People had a lot. They came as pretty as close as any time prior to us to having solved the material problems of food, shelter, clothing, and all that kind of stuff. So they had this time to develop all of these other things, and they looked at it very differently. So just to be clear, the notion of being gay is a very different one today than it was in the past. The notion of being anything is only about 200 years old, and it started with the advent of sociology. Prior to that, people were just committing actions. And during the Middle Ages, when the church was in power, things like sodomy or stuff was a sin, but nobody was gay.
so this whole
It was
question of identity, what you are, you're male, you're
that's
female,
a
you're gay, you're straight, you're non-binary, whatever,
that's a
is
very modern conception. Yes.
and that's just an extra aspect of delusion in a world of decadence.
Yes. Yes. In this particular case, so it never appeared like this in the Roman Empire in the height of the Roman Empire, but people still committed these acts, but they just weren't gay, straight, lesbian, or anything like that. It was just what it was done. So ancient Greek sexuality, males were usually gay when they were out in the army for half the year. Then they'd come back and they'd be straight with their wives. Um, it That language would not make sense in the ancient world. It only makes sense to us who think of being gay or being straight. For them, it was just that's what you do when you're with guys. This is what you do when you're with women.
Yeah, actually, have you read Christopher Hitchens' book, Hitch 22?
No, I'm afraid I haven't.
The way he speaks about it is that in boarding school, um,
Hmm.
um, boys it was not uncommon for boys to, I mean, you're only with other boys, they would explore with each
Uh,
other.
Probably yes.
And that
That
he says he's straight as an arrow, now, but at the time he experimented in high
hmm
school, and he thought nothing of it, and it wasn't really something he's ashamed of. He And I
yeah,
guess, yeah, because people didn't think about it in those terms.
right. And so, just to be clear, this woman identified as lesbian. She now identifies as trans and believes that these things aren't choices; these are innovations.
Okay, they're not choices; they're innovation. They're what, like, like
Right.
survival,
Right.
evolutionary,
My apologies. I made a mistake there.
strategic
They were they
innovations.
were they were choices. They are choices. They're not. You're not born this way. In fact, she makes a comment in one of the videos I recall seeing. Any lesbian woman who can't appreciate the beauty of man of a man is somehow really hurt. Is like she's maimed in some way, and that's not healthy. Um,
I
and the
agree.
same would go for the other way, right?
So
It's
so
not.
so for the incels, or the not the incels, the men going their own way crowd on the internet, who are swearing off women, they're missing something. They're doing it wrong. And then the women who had one bad experience and then are terrified of men and won't go near them, they're also doing it wrong. Is that what she's
Well,
saying?
if they had one really bad experience of man, yes, clearly they've been hurt. It's been a traumatic event for them. Um, it's what she would say. You are swearing off men. It's a decision, and it might be best for your mental health. It might be best for your physical health as well. Uh, but again, it's not. It's the reaction to trauma is not the ideal. I mean, you shouldn't have had the trauma in the first place. But what can you do after the fact, right? Um, it's ingrained in you. But she says they're maimed, right? If a lesbian woman can't appreciate male beauty, they're maimed in a sense, mentally, spiritually, physically. I'm not sure what she would say, which one of those, but perhaps all of them. The same is true for gay men. If you cannot appreciate a beautiful woman, even if you're not attracted to her or you're repulsed by it in some way, um, or whatever the motivation is behind you for being gay, um, it is a choice that you've made, and there is nothing physically stopping a gay man from having straight sex. It's a preference, and preferences are quite often choices. I mean,
Well,
um,
one has to get erect, and that right, that's in the mind. So you have to be
yeah,
stimulated.
sometimes it is. I also understand that it happens quite naturally and sometimes out of our control.
That's that's true. That is true.
So essentially, yeah. So for her, it's not a choice. It's or sorry, I keep saying it's not a choice. It is a choice. It's You're not born this way. And she just makes a quick thought experiment. Imagine if there were a gay gene.
Yeah, which they haven't found, by the way. They've been looking.
Which they haven't found. She believes they will never find. And if by any sort of delusional thing somebody convinces people that there is a gay gene, this is probably going to be a very bad thing for a minority to be able to be genetically identified.
Yeah, that's a yeah. Well, she think okay. Why
Yeah.
she's worried about the fascists gaining power? Is she?
Oh yeah, fascists. They're all around us, and they are a constant danger. Yes.
Does she mention that threat in the book?
No, no. This is an art history book.
Well, okay. All right.
Uh,
Well, let's move on
yeah.
then.
So, so all of this is the ground for Paglia's theory of beauty. Believe it or not, we're getting to beauty now. Okay. Any artist who looks at the real world and stylizes it is Apollonian. They're taking nature and improving it, making it better in some way or another, whatever the artist feels is worth putting there. In this book, she talks about 24 different sexual personae that have been that she has been able to find, tracing Western literature, visual arts, images, and all that, any form of art over the last several thousand years. And these 24, some of them are we don't hear about them anymore. They're not that popular. Some of them have been around all the time, and they're analogous to the shift from Earth cult to sky cult. You are taking nature, you're stylizing it, you're making it essentially better, and it's almost always visual. Uh, it's very visual.
Very aesthetic.
Yes, it's all very aesthetic. Yes, it's a swerve away from the natural, from the Chthonian, and that's what makes it interesting and Apollonian. And everybody does this to some degree or another. Um, so when let's see.
Beauty is our shield against the ugliness of nature, says Sergio in the chat.
Yes, it is. In fact, and it's a delusion. Oh yeah, she makes this brilliant thing. When you look at beauty, a beautiful painting such as a landscape, a beautiful landscape, you're silently saying a prayer, fingering your worry beads. That what you are seeing is what you really want to see, and it may be a very beautiful scene, but underneath it, um, there are animals who you may not see. Animals that are preying upon each other, killing each other. There's the natural life and growth uh, cycles that are not usually captured in these kind of paintings. The artist is always stylizing nature, usually to make himself feel better, him or herself feel better, because again, most artists have been male, maybe not so much anymore, but in the history of the world, and they've done this in order to overcome their fear of women, their fear of nature, and their fear of death.
Well, I mean this plays right into a lot of the feminist critique of media and movies, especially, and how women are portrayed in magazines, in basically through the male gaze.
Yes.
Um, there's so many critiques like that, and they all make a lot of sense, really, when thought about in this light. If
Mhm.
it's all just men's delusions,
Men's projected delusions, yes,
yeah,
but they're accepted by women because
right,
women actually support this. Um, they go out and buy all the sorts of technologies that will enhance their natural features. So makeup, high heels, bras, all of this stuff are the technologies that accentuate the nature. They stylize it, they make it better. They set the triggers that would normally trigger men to action, and they enhance them.
right, yeah, yeah. Well, Instagram, they know all the poses, how to pose, how to show the butt right, how to
Yes, and with Photoshop, you can enhance it even if it's not perfect.
right. So
That
they're playing the game as much as
yes,
we
it's a
are.
drama. It's a drama of civilization, and in many cases, it's fun. It makes people feel great because it's a delusion. This is where she loves civilization. The delusion is fun. It's interesting. It's dramatic. It's much. You'd much rather be playing in this delusional world than having to fight for survival.
That's right. I agree.
Yeah.
That so
Yes.
far.
So far, okay. So, um, okay. So the reason we have the sexual persona. So every civilization comes with strict, very formalized taboos, um, or rituals, or rules governing sex. And part of the reason is because sex is very close to nature. It's always getting us back to nature. And therefore being dangerous, nature being dangerous. So we try and tame it, we try and limit it, we try and say under only these circumstances is it okay, and everywhere else it's not, and you can't think about it any other time. So if we were to follow all the rules of our society, like don't talk to strangers, there would never be any sex. The society would collapse and it would die. We sort of implicitly know this, so we have to get back to nature and the sexual persona. And so before we get to that, the all of society is a sex inhibitor in that sense. All these taboos, all these things we like, we can't even use some language or in certain circumstances, but we can in others. This is an example of the taboos that are allowed and not allowed with regards to sex.
And violence.
So, and violence. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Sorry. It's always violence is always implicit in this as well. Um, but because it's sexual personae, we're not talking about violent personae. Uh, the sexual persona that she's discovered are essentially civilization inhibitors or sex disinhibitors. So if civilization is taming your sex drive in order for you not to wildly and aggressively pursue it at every moment so that we can all work together and feel safe, the personae are a means of bringing it back at select moments within the culture, and so that we can act, so that we can procreate the species,
So we have to.
and actually have fun at the same time.
So we allow for certain instances in areas where we can go back to nature.
Well, it's funny you should say that. It's not that we allow, we don't allow, but we break those in a routinized or in a
Ritualized.
sanitized, ritualized procedures. Yes, and the sexual personae are the tools or techniques for that.
Okay.
So if we were to go back to nature, then we wouldn't need the sexual persona. She says that animals who don't have culture have no problem. They have no inhibitions. They just go at it, right?
Just
And
go.
they can forgive and forget. There's an example of like if a squirrel has a litter at the wrong time, another male will kill her litter and then impregnate that squirrel for a new litter so that his genes will go through. That imagine if that were happening in human cycles, right? Or in human society,
That
that
would
would be
destroy someone's whole
incredibly
life.
traumatic. Yes, it not only would, it would destroy a lot of people's lives, right? So we can't have that. That's kind of what would that could easily happen, and it probably has happened many times in history. I mean, when a conquering army comes in, they usually kill off all the males and take all the women as slaves, and if the kids are too young, they kill them also, right? That very thing that happens to squirrels on a regular basis in nature has happened um, within conquering armies,
Right. Yes.
right? Uh, So the point of civilization is to stop that. So how do we stop that? We put in sex inhibitors at every step of the way. These are the taboos, the rules, the laws, the norms of society that stop us. And if we take them seriously, they do stop us. The trouble is, if we take it seriously, then our civilizations are going to collapse because there won't be any new kids, for one thing, and there will be very little fun.
Oof.
So the sexual personae have been present in all of our civilizations, all Western civilizations, and she speculates that they've been in most of these have probably been in all civilizations, maybe not all of them, and there might be other ones in other civilizations that never made it to Western culture. But these 24 she's identified in Western culture. And they are there as sex de-inhibitors. No, I guess a double negative there. To promote the Thonian in a ritualized way.
Okay.
All right. Yeah, they're sex disinhibitors. Each sexual persona is an art, and it takes the signs of sexual attractiveness from nature. It stylizes it, enhances it, and makes it better. So, red lips. All women have red lips, but if you make them much redder, you're accentuating what's naturally there.
Yeah.
Right. If you put on high heels, every woman still has the same figure and curve, but it accentuates it. It sets off a trigger. Come look at me. And it's most of these are extremely powerful. Most men will drop their jaw and follow their gaze. That's and we're taught essentially not to stare. It's not polite to stare, right? But when a beautiful woman walks by, we forget all of that.
Civilization goes out the window.
Yes, in a very
for a moment.
in almost a trivial sense there. Like when you stare after a woman, there's no real harm at that. But the whole point of the sexual persona is that it can lead to harm. Like that's what happens when you become uninhibited, right? So yes, so she's so the whole point of sexual persona is to ostentatiously display all of the traits of nature that have been stylized and accentuated. That makes sense so far?
Makes sense.
Okay, so and we'll start covering these next time. In fact, some of them we can fit a whole bunch of them into one session, but some of them will take a whole session. So next session, we're going to cover the femme fatale, which is probably the most common sexual persona for women in all of Western culture, and probably in all other cultures as well. It's just found everywhere.
Popular one.
Yes. After that, we're going to find one that's not very popular today, but has been very popular in the past, the idea of the beautiful boy. And then we'll start to look at a whole bunch of other ones that are much less detailed. These two, in the history of Western civilization, have been the two dominant ones. They've been everywhere. And she'll point them out from the earliest parts of history, like 6000 BC, to Gothic temples or Gothic churches. It's pretty amazing. Anyway, so she's identified 24 of them that have repeatedly over our course of history, but she also describes them into some of them, not all of them, into two different adjectival groups. So she labels an androgen or androgyne as one sexual persona that takes male and female traits and mixes them at the same time. So one example that she gives is Fred Astaire. He's clearly a man, but he dances, and he dances very well. Dance is usually a female thing because it's very attractive. That's an androgyne. He's doing androgyne-like activities.
I mean, you could argue that throughout history, it's men do a lot of dancing too. War dancing, tribal dancing, ritualistic.
Yes, there's all that, but we're talking about sexual personae here. So men don't usually dance for the pleasure of women or to turn on, right?
Right.
Whereas Fred Astaire
did.
Right? So that's what I mean by mixing and matching the two. So yes, without a doubt, men have danced as well, and as you said, war dances and all that kind of stuff. They weren't for the sake of what she's talking about. The second major adjective that she talks about is the hermaphrodite, which has both male and female parts. The idea is that a hermaphrodite persona doesn't mix the two, but has the two, male and female parts, but they're not mixed. So William Shakespeare's Cleopatra, she considers a hermaphrodite persona because on the one hand, she's a queen. She acts like a man, sentences people to death, beats on people, yells at people, giving orders and all that kind of stuff. At the same time, she seduces Mark Antony and Julius Caesar, very feminine, but not at the same time. She's not trying to seduce as a dominatrix. She's seducing as a woman. But she's giving orders to her people at the same time, in different scenes. So not mixing the two, knowing what male and female types are at any one particular time, and switching between the two of them is a hermaphrodite persona. So some of them have these, not all of them do. So the femme fatale, there's no hermaphrodite there. It's no androgen. It's 100% feminine. The beautiful boy is 100% masculine.
The beautiful.
But other ones, yes, but other ones are can be mixed. Not all of them. So here's the list of the 24 sexual persona in alphabetical order. So the Amazon, the androgen of manners, the android, the beautiful boy, the court hermaphrodite, the dandy, the decadent aesthete, the drag queen, the epiocene, the femme fatale, the gorgon, the great mother, Kepra, the lesbian, the male heroine, the manufactured object, Mercurius, Pythonesus, Tiresiasis, or something. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that right.
Yeah.
The transsexual, the twin, the vampire, the Venus barbata, and the virago.
These sound very like they're going to be fun.
They're not what I expect. When you think of a femme fatale today, it wasn't always like that. We're going to see an evolution of her. Same with the beautiful boy. Today it's considered bad taste to love a boy, but it hasn't been like that for most of human history. That covers what we did last time.
Sorry?
That pretty much covers what we did in part 2.
Yeah, we skipped through it pretty good. I wanted to ask about where we talk about modern Western notions of freedom, individualism, and self-realization.
Yes, those are all sorts of free will concepts. The idea that you can self-actualize, you can delude yourself into self-actualizing is the more accurate way of looking at it.
Okay, so you can't really reach any kind of self-actualization, is what.
In the sense of that you have free will, no.
Okay.
So in the sense that you might that the universe has conspired and all the forces have come around to make it look like you have, yes, that's possible.
And when a woman appropriates these notions.
Oh, did we skip that? Yes, I think we did, didn't we? Yes. Okay, so she believes that women usually have more wisdom and more realism than men because they're closer to nature.
Inherently, because of their reminders.
Yes, because they're reminders. Every month, they're reminded every month that they are a woman. And men don't get that. Men have...
We're free to live in the clouds, think of ourselves as grandiose, right? We don't have anything pulling us down.
Exactly. So this constant reminder that they have no control over, or very, very, very little control if you take drugs and stuff, is a reminder that forces are upon women that you can't control. And okay, so here's some pretty controversial stuff that that where is it? I'm just looking for it. That Paglia says, or did we do that last time?
This is at the top of the second part of the second half of the page.
Okay.
Top of page 2.
Top of page 2. Okay. Yes. Okay. So yeah. Okay. Let's read. Let me quote what I quoted here. The harder she fights. No, that's not where I started. Sorry. Okay. Looking for the beginning of the quote. Okay. Okay, well, maybe I just paraphrased a lot of it here. Okay, so when woman approaches these notions for herself, she isn't being a man. She's become more pathetic than a man, for she denies herself. The idea is that men are pathetic for thinking that they're so grand when they're not. Women who are supposed to have this greater realism and greater understanding and greater wisdom forget that and then try and act like a man. There's less of a forgiving attitude because they should know better. And when they fight that, uh, they well, nature punishes them more. And the example that she gives is that here's the quote: the female body is a Thonian machine, indifferent to the spirit who inhabits it. In other words, it doesn't matter what a woman thinks; her body's going to do what it wants, or what nature wants it to do. Nature cares only for species, never individuals. The humiliating dimension of this biological fact are most directly experienced by women, who probably have a greater realism and wisdom than men because of it. And here's the pretty controversial one. Every pregnant woman has body and self taken over by Thonian forces beyond her control. In the welcomed pregnancy, this is a happy sacrifice. But in the unwanted one, initiated by rape or misadventure, it is a horror. Such unfortunate women look directly into nature's heart of darkness, for a fetus is a benign tumor, a vampire who steals in order to live. The so-called miracle of birth is nature getting her own way. And she doesn't say it, but it's nature getting her own way on women. And she's phrasing it, and she says it in other paragraphs. It's almost like rape. I mean, a woman does no control over what happens to her when she's pregnant. I mean, nowadays she can get it aborted, but assuming that she wants to have it, or she can't get an abortion for some reason, nature is having her way, and nature's a her in most in Paglia's ontology, is having her way with women. Women feel this more than men. The threat of pregnancy is always there, and they are reminded of this every month. Men don't get this, so men can easily feel more deluded than women. So women who understand and know this, and then start to deny that among themselves and try and act like men, she has less sympathy for.
Because they're denying, because they're buying into the delusion and denying their
Yes.
nature.
Well, yes. Okay. So consider this. In our society, women are told that they can have it all. They can have a job and a family life. Um, Men don't have that. They can have the family life and a job because it's the woman who's supposed to normally take care of that. So by giving them this delusion, this is a branch of feminism that says that women can have it all. They are adding to the anxiety and the burnout of women. So in the past, when women had their sphere, things may not have been better or worse in that between the different spheres in that sense. But now that they've entered into the male sphere and kept their old sphere, the anxiety, the extra workload, uh, has profound mental health challenges on women, or additional mental health challenges, as well as physical challenges on women that they wouldn't have had otherwise. Now, if women make those choices, they should go into it with a full understanding, which is not what feminism says that they do. Women are encouraged. I don't want to say encouraged. It's the successful female executive with a family is put up as an ideal role model, which she thinks, which I believe she would say is um, exceedingly unlikely. It's like if I were to say you should get into computers because you could become the next Bill Gates. The chances are exceedingly unlikely that anybody will, but maybe one or two will, and they'll be thrown up there as examples to emulate. And more than likely, most people will not reach that. And if they burn out and develop mental health problems and anxiety as a result of this anxiety and all sorts of other things as a result, that was not helpful for them. That's what she's saying.
She's saying they're getting bad advice.
Yes.
It's reminiscent of there's a movement now I know that's being talked about from I think from doctors reminding women in their 20s that if you're thinking about having kids, you should really do it sooner than rather than later, 20s and 30s, because of the complications and problems that can arise as you get older, and trying to have them
One
then.
more set of stressors on women.
Right, right, because women are now trying to get the career done first, and then have the kids, and so doctors apparently are warning against that.
Yeah, so that's just another stressor. It doesn't mean that women can't do that or make those choices. And I say choices in the delusional sense of the word that she's talking about. But to suggest um, that you should go into basketball because you could become the next Michael Jordan or something, the literally the chances of achieving the images that are set before uh, women today are very remote, and they cost a lot.
So for
So
Paglia, that this you can do both thing is as successfully is as unlikely as that.
yes, yes. So you can have vestiges of the two, or you can have elements of it, but um, the role models that are being portrayed quite often are beyond most people's reach. I know that when I started engineering, I wanted to be the next Bill Gates. I quickly was reduced, or
You
my
wanted to
delusion
be
was
the next
quickly
Bill
popped.
Gates?
My delusion was quickly popped. What it would take to do that, plus the luck that would be required, and the being at the right place at the right time. Um, no.
What are you
Uh,
talking about? Hard work. We're in a meritocracy, Jeff.
oh, of course we
Capitalism.
are.
Just
Yes.
hard
We'll let
work
that be
and
your little bubble. We'll let that be your little delusion. So yeah. So she has big problems with a lot of the feminists, a lot of feminist idols, a lot of feminist ideals, because they don't relate to the real world as it is,
so,
and they create forces within people that manipulate them into doing things that are probably not in their best interest.
so she thinks third wave feminists are buying into the male delusion too much.
Yeah, I suspect so. I think that would be. I think she would agree with that. Yeah.
All right. What chat? Does anybody want to take on Paglia here a bit, or her ideas? Oh, I got one from Jackie Fox from a while ago. He asked about Camille's interpretation of Aphrodite's birth, if she has one. Because technically Aphrodite was born without a mother through a literal act of emasculation. When we were talking about the history of
Yes. So if I recall, I think it was Zeus who like spunked into the ocean or something like that, and out she came.
yeah,
Uh, that's another example of a step in the direction of sky cult. Here again, it's the man who's creating, not the woman.
right.
It's a movement in the direction away from belly magic to head magic, and it's delusional. I mean, people believe myths, and they really affect how people behave. So they're worth studying in that respect, just as much as the delusions that we have today.
Theory Plebe says we are all sold dreams that require delusions of grandeur, but the point about independence, the kind gained through a career, is that you're not stuck living off the good graces of others.
Yes. So funny. That the good graces of others. Yes. So modern Western culture has probably created that notion. Um, it probably wasn't always true. Uh,
In what sense?
okay. In one of the videos I did see about her, she talks about how Italian women, like of her grandmother's generation, tended to be stronger and tougher than a lot of the men, as in they actually did a lot of the work, and men loafed around. Um, but they were not pushed around. All right, they did the work for their families in the same sense that men would do some of the work as well, um, but they weren't pushed around. The modern first world woman is an incredibly delicate flower compared to most women around the world. And this delicate flower that modern women are, and modern first world women, um, have are easily triggered, are easily offended, or um, have delusions of what real love and true love is all about. Part of it, men too. Okay, just to be clear, Western first world men are also pretty snowflakey and flowery, but compared to women in other cultures, she says, from her understanding of this, is that the more civilized we get, the more passive women become.
The more what?
Passive, as in delicate, need to be taken care of.
And she's saying that's that's the wrong way for them to go.
Yes. Well, okay. Oh, okay. Sorry. This is okay. There's another thing going on here. Um, Women have always been, in a sense, protected by men. Not that they've always needed it in the same way. So quite often, women can be the equals of men in many cases, especially a mother over a child, right? I mean, they've got the size thing, and women have always, in that sense, dominated men, and men have always tried to get away from their mother, in that sense. But on a more societal level, there's always been the idea that men take care of women. So um, when there's a ship that's sinking, it's women and children first.
Yeah.
Um, uh, she gives an example that when she started her university, the dorm that she lived in, she had to sign in at 11 o'clock, whereas the men's dorms, they could go out all night and do whatever they wanted. And she understands that this was for the protection of women. But many feminists have rebelled against that protection of men because it was like school administrators, who were all men, who decided these rules, right?
Right.
Um, Instead of being protected by men, now they are free of the protection of men.
But she
This,
sees that as a good thing, though, right?
yes, no. So it can be a good thing if they are smart about it.
If they understand what they're getting into, is what she's saying,
And
right?
if they, yeah, exactly. But at the same time as they've won this freedom to be as free as men, they're also being deluded by a lot of feminists things that say that they are, in fact, safe around men because civilization will protect them. But there are cycles out there. There's testosterone. There is, whenever
Alcohol.
murder goes, yes, alcohol. Um, this doesn't make them safer. And if they are unwilling to recognize that, which is a lot of what some branches of feminism are pushing out there, uh, this newly gained freedom is actually putting them in greater danger
Yeah.
because now men don't usually fight for the honor of women.
Well, do we know? Does she talk about rape statistics say from before and after this period of 60s and 70s, when
Uh, no, not directly, but she gives two anecdotes, or well, I guess one from literature and one from her particular set. According to her, in her grandmother's time, if a woman was raped, her brothers and her father would go and castrate the raper, so it doesn't happen. Um, this was a common thing in the past. So think of the Bible, Genesis. I think she said it was 34 or 35. I forget. Jacob's daughter, Diana or something like that, gets raped by a neighboring tribe. So her brothers get together, they trick them a little bit, and then slaughter them all. They essentially killed an entire city. It must have been a pretty small city,
an
but
entire city?
that's what the Bible says. Okay, so
Okay.
they went out, they killed all the males and took all the females with them and incorporated them as slaves into their tribe.
Because of
The
one
point,
rape.
because of one rape on their sister. Yes. This is one of the ways that men have protected women. So in a time like that, a woman could walk down the street, everybody knows, okay, she's got like four brothers, I ain't touching her, kind of stuff, right? So of course there would be women who may not have brothers and may not have as much protection, but it's a different style of protection. Men and women men were supposed to sacrifice their lives for a woman. So if somebody spoke badly of a woman, the men around there would challenge this guy, right? Nowadays, no, women are free to do what they want. We don't have to protect them. They don't want, in a sense, our protection, which is what some branches of feminism are saying. And she's saying, that could be a good thing, could be a bad thing. The jury's still out. Unless you smarten up, it's probably going to be a bad thing for you.
Okay, so she's basically saying freedom is good, the delusion is good as long as you understand the risk, and that she's so and her problem with third wave feminism is that it is pretending that all of these new gains are without risk, I guess, or without
Yes.
any
With risk.
problems.
Without risk and without, yeah, she's basically saying they're without risk and without problems. She makes an interesting claim in one of the videos that I watched. Gay men have always understood this. When they are cruising, they understand that they can get hurt, and it happens. I mean, there was some
Guy in Toronto,
talking to the
yeah.
gay community in Toronto, right? They understand these risks, and still they do it. Some do, some don't. Um, I've been learning about gay culture as a result of Camille Paglia. Apparently, there's a term called um, rough trades, which
Ooh.
is sort of a code for um, the increased excitement that comes from a more dangerous situation. But the more dangerous situation can be also deadly in
Really?
gay culture. So this is uh,
So gay men understand the risks of getting involved with other men.
yes, but not only that, of being even discovered. So in the 1950s, if you were discovered as gay before the Stonewall riots, you were probably going to be beat up by a bunch of straight men as well. They understood this. They took precautions. There was a whole set of, of secret signaling techniques, right?
Right, but how does that apply to third wave feminism
Oh, well, if women think that they're perfectly safe, they're delusional. These gay men understood that they weren't safe, and so they adapted. They made uh, they set up this entire signal system. They were very careful.
So is
They
that
were
her only criticism of third wave feminism? It's just that it's delusional in that it doesn't see the risks involved in the slut walk type stuff and the
yes, but it manifests itself in so many different cases. So you don't see the risks in becoming and adopting the ideals of this new feminism, where you can have both a job, and a successful career, and a
okay.
successful family life. Um, I mean, some do clearly,
So
so it's possible, but the risks are stacked against you, and there's a lot that you may not understand. And yeah, in a nutshell, that might be it, but it applies in so many different fields of human life.
okay, so she is in favor of the new freedoms, just with caveats and with understanding.
Yes, so there will probably be. I suspect that more people are going. Okay,
Well, she
okay,
was she was
actually,
a second wave feminist, right?
I believe so. Yes. Okay, so she cautions one thing: when there's a narrative within the feminist movement right now that women have all this power or have become equalized to men, but still there's rape going on. Still there's these problems that men have. So what is our solution? Is to replace the protection that men had with governmental force. So government must make new laws
State force, yeah.
and enforce them. Yes, she talks about university. The idea that university should get involved in in the dating game by regulating dating between men and women. She thinks is kind of regressive, and setting up this alternative trial system that's not quasi legal, but not really. Is a step in a backwards direction, and that particular branch of feminism that advocates for this kind of stuff should be going in a different way.
Right, because she's saying, I think I've heard her say this, that it's infantilizing sort of, and we're asking.
Yes. Which is
Um,
why women are so delicate now that they can't be touched or triggered in any way. And she compares this with the Italian women of her grandmother who could stand up to a man and shout him down. Um, and
right, but still that there's still always going to be the physical difference to contend with, right? So I mean, even in Italy in the 19th century, a
mhm.
big strong man, regardless of how, I don't know, internally weak he is, I guess, has power and dominion over.
Yes and no. So again, the other men in a world where men are supposed to protect women,
Right.
and we
Okay.
understand that one man is not going to stand up against 20 other men.
So okay. So even though he is stronger and more powerful, he would not consider risking his own life by doing something bad to
Her
that
brother,
woman.
her mother, her father. or her uncles, right? Most people had extended families, so this was beyond
Those
the
are also
nuclear
small
family.
communities too, though. So that is complicated by um, universities where people come in from hundreds of kilometers away to small towns and
Yes,
like Kingston and uh,
yes.
go to
So funny you should
unsupervised
mention that.
parties and stay at his
Yes.
nightclub.
So her big, he keeps bringing up this in many videos that I've seen of her, is like if a woman goes into a frat party by herself and starts drinking, she's being stupid. But what most women have to understand is that the dynamics in a frat party are between the men. They're setting up their pecking order, and the women are incidental to it. They don't have to be there. If they're there, they are stepping in between men who are setting up their own delusions of grandeur between each other. That's a very dangerous place to be for any woman, for the simple reason that sex is a way that men show who they are.
But it's still kind of blaming the victim, though, is it not?
So yes, she has no problem blaming the victim if you're stupid. So just to be
Yikes!
clear,
Yikes! Big
she gives
yikes!
she gives two examples. Yes, you have the right to dress any way you want, just as certainly as you have the right to go to a supermarket and park your car and leave the keys on the hood, go into the supermarket, get your food, and come back and still find your keys there. You have that right, but it's a stupid thing to do. You have the right to take out your life savings in cash, take a nap in the park beside this wad of money, and not have it stolen. But you'd be pretty stupid to do that. The same is true with these frat parties, is basically what she's saying. Women should stick together. They should look out for each other. Don't go there by yourself. Don't get so drunk that you can't walk. Um, just like gay
So
men.
so she's kind of saying the conservatives are right on a lot of these issues.
Yes, but that doesn't mean that we should go backwards. Uh, when you say conservatives, the idea that women should look out for each other, that they are in fact the weaker sex, the second sex, the one that have achieved the same rights as men but have not got the same power as men because of the physical difference, because the dynamics between men and women are different. Um, the between men, there's always the possibility of violence. But even today, if a man hits a woman, like I mean, all these guys are thinking, "What's the matter with you? You're an idiot." That kind of stuff, right? It's still socially dangerous for a man to hit a woman. Now,
Yeah,
if she hits him first, then the rules are in flux. But 100 years ago, even if a woman hit a man, there's no justification for that,
still can't.
except if the civilization has gone away, and in which case you've got soldiers essentially raping women all as much as they want. That's that change. Those changes are not properly articulated within the feminist ideologies that she's criticizing.
Okay, so they just haven't accounted for the real world changes in society and civilization and material conditions.
Yes, which in her mind haven't really changed in since we became Homo sapiens. Civilization just inhibits them,
All
but
right.
doesn't.
Um, Theory Plebe from the chat says next time you better do Origins, Family, Property, and State by Friedrich Engels.
That would be quite a ways down. There's a whole other list of things to do between then and then.
Well, put it on
So,
the list.
okay, we'll do that.
Engels. Um, all right. Well, do you want to? Well, we've already kind of wrapped it up for what we're doing next time. Do you have any final thoughts?
Um, yeah, just remember anything I say here is what I think she would say. So,
Yeah.
you do know that I do have a public image, and any one of these things could be taken out of context.
Right.
And the
Yes.
context
Okay. This is
is what I
Camille
think.
Paglia speaking only. Jeff is defending her as if she were here.
Yes.
Okay.
I think she needs my help to be defended. By the way, she just doesn't happen to be here.
Yeah, she's quite a talker. Um, somebody asked to name all 24 personae. Instead of that, I'll just type them out and put them in the chat in the description, so
Sure.
if people want to look them up. But all right, well, that was an hour and a half. That was good. I think we covered what we need to cover. Next time we're going to get into some of those sexual personae, I guess.
Yes, that's right. We'll start with the femme fatale.
Okay, femme fatale.
Yes.
Okay, okay. All right. Well, 2 weeks from now, we'll do it again.
Sounds good.
Thanks for sticking around, chat, and thanks for doing this with me, Jeff.
My pleasure.
We'll see you next time.
Absolutely.
All right. Bye now.